You definitely can. And it's so important when you're talking about, is it hard? Well, what is really hard? Is it hard to not own a home? Or is it uncomfortable in allocating those funds to what matters and what's important to you? And I always try to remember to reframe things. We want to say yes. Okay, so if you're going to buy your very first home, for example, and you're looking at $1 million, so you're saying, okay, so yes, it's a certain amount of money. It is just a matter of reframing it. Am I choosing to put this money into the home? What's more uncomfortable? Rent, some people enjoy renting, some people don't. And so it's just a matter of what your values are and what matters to you and what kind of lifestyle that you're really wanting to have. I love what you said. It's your life, it's your responsibility, and it's your choice and your decision and your plan. And how amazing is that? Like that's what we get to choose to do. We get to design how we want to live, and we need to think big. The biggest mistake I ever made was not thinking big enough, not dreaming big enough, not thinking, why do I need to live in the same neighborhood as anybody else? Why do I need to drive the same car as everybody else? Take the same. What do I really, really want? And I love what you touched on earlier when you said you don't have to worry about how. And I find so many people get stuck in the how. Everybody's like, well, how do I do this? How can I do this? How can I make this? How can I create this? If you are just stuck on that hamster wheel of how, you're never going to move forward because you're so stuck in one part of the equation. And so it's not our job to micromanage absolutely everything. We are creative beings and we have the capacity to use our imagination in the most incredible way and let the universe and let the people that are going to come into your life and help propel you forward do the how with you and for you instead of every single person just being concerned about the how and getting stuck in that anxiety and getting stuck, basically just stuck, and not being able to move forward with the plan because they start to get paralysis about what do I do next, or they become paralyzed and not being thinking that they're able to achieve what they want. And that's why I love the thinking into results, because it reminds us that the most important workhouse in our mind is our imagination. And you are only limited to what you can imagine in your mind. And that, when it comes to finances, I find that, our beliefs through life are very limited. There's a lot of scarcity, there's a lot of lack and limitation. And as we move into an identity of abundance and an identity of creating and building wealth and becoming financially free and enjoying, all the opportunity that money allows us to afford and do, the imagination is so incredibly important, because if you can't imagine it, then you don't even know where you're going to go and you wouldn't even think of what's possible. And that's why I love, mentorship financially and people using a service like yours where you're starting to become mentored with your money. It helps to open up that creative part of us that we used to use as kids. And, you see kids all the time and they have these massive ideas about how they want their life to be. And they're so incredibly excited. And I always tell people, ask a child, do they ever worry about how? We sure do. I know they don't. They're just like, I'm going to fly into outer space and be an astronaut. They don't worry about how. They don't worry about what ship they're going to fly in. And so I find for, when we're working towards our goals and building our financial buckets and putting the money into these different things for what we want to move towards, start imagining. I always say to people, when you're talking about saving for a trip, what do you want that trip to look like? Don't worry about how much it's going to cost. Take a break from that. What kind of trip do you want to go on? And sit on that vacation. If you want to go to the beach, sit on the beach. feel the sun, get that nice smoothie, enjoy what's going on in the buffet. Don't worry about how I'm going to pay for it, because that's where mentorship comes in. And that's where you're going to have yourself, where you're able to say, okay, this is how we're going to do it. And then you start getting excited and building that momentum. You make the decisions, you stick to the plan, and you start to grow. And as your identity builds into that person that's going to take more than one trip a year, and that person that's going to live in the type of house that you want to live in, as you build that momentum and as you make the decision and you stick to it and you don't negotiate with yourself so that you're sliding back into your old identity and back into that old comfort, you want to, continue to embrace the discomfort of becoming the new person who's going to take those trips, who's going to maybe not eat out today, and they're going to choose to allocate those employees and those funds to doing what they really want to do and what their imagination really lets them run free and create, and no longer make those negotiative decisions of procrastination where they end up not moving forward. And in 6 months' time, instead of being on the beach, they're exactly where they are today. And that's exactly what they said they didn't want to do. If you don't want to stay where you are today, then you need to embrace new ideas and change, and embracing the discomfort so that you're able to move forward. Yeah, and that's what I love what you're saying is you're spreading across, you're being abundant in all areas. And that's what I find the most important thing is that we continue to strive for that abundant thinking, and that we're living in abundant way, and we're living from the end, so that we're not feeling like we're in lack and limitation and we have to trade one thing for another. You can do everything that you want to do in life. It's just about creating the space. And that's what you're saying by allocating, if we're using finances, when we're allocating finances to different goals and, different things that we value in this period of time, it's not about choosing one or the other. It's about having everything. It's just doing it in the right way. And it's doing it in a way that works, that empowers you, that gets you excited, where you see the results, where you're moving in that forward direction, and you can start building on that momentum. It makes you feel really, really good. And you know that you're not just floundering and, going through life on a raft that's, just floating kind of everywhere, and you're going from one comfort to another. When everybody's going out and they're just frivolously throwing money around, you're like, no, this is where my money's going. And like I said, you might not see it in the first month, you might not see it in the second month, but that commitment, that discipline, that choosing you and choosing what you want over, just whatever you see on the TV or whatever you see out in the community, you're building that empowerment and you're building that self-esteem, and you have made that choice. And no matter what happens, you're going to continue moving towards what you've made that decision on. And when people say, you know what, I want to, reach $1 million and I want to do all these things, and they're looking at their habits, and maybe their habits are not moving in the direction of what a high performing person or a very wealthy person would be doing, this is where we start to see our knowing doing gap. And if you want to be a high performer and be a very wealthy person, if, you're not making those decisions to allocate funds in a wide expansive way, and maybe you're sleeping in, or maybe you're not doing these things, or if you had extra time and you're just sitting in front of the TV scrolling mindlessly for hours and hours and hours, you're not putting it to where it could be of better use. And I had a person say to me, it was another person in finance, and they said, for every dollar that you earn, it's an employee. And what are your employees doing? What are they doing today for you? And when we talk about being abundant and multiplying our money and multiplying our time, it moves beyond what we can just do physically, because there's only so many hours in the day. We all get the same amount of hours, but how do we multiply ourselves and grow ourselves exponentially in a bigger way to make those really big quantum leaps financially that we're able to do with ease instead of just with our physical hands or our mind or selling on a phone. What can we do so that we're expanding and multiplying our time? And if you start looking at your dollars as employees and you go, okay, well, I want to put my employees to work, what kind of job are your dollars doing? Are they just constantly eating out, or are they growing and maximizing for you in a way that's going to help you get that new home or that new car? Or, not only take one vacation a year, but why don't we take three? And if your dollars are going to work for you and you're going to work for you, then you can start feeling such a level of wealth that you've never experienced before. And you get that internal fortitude and you get that internal self esteem where you're like, yeah, I want to do more because I know not only am I working, but so is my money. And it's getting me to where I want to go.